And joining us that 1 month from today, we will be in the middle of what appears to be opening day weekend for the 2020 Major League Baseball season that the last time I spoke to this guy looked like it would never happen on this green earth. But it did happen, apparently. Get the latest right now from a man who's been all over it from The Athletic, Evan Drellich, joining us back here on the show. How are you, sir?
Rich, we made it.
Did we, though? Did we? Have
sure?
we? Have we? We're sure?
Well, the next step here, and this could happen likely today, is they have to finalize the schedule. The union has to basically sign off on that, and I'm told that that is likely an occurrence today. So they are making still steady progress. And then there's this interesting possibility that we could still maybe end up with an expanded postseason if the league made an offer to the union that the union liked. And there's no indication that that's happened yet, but that possibility still does exist.
Well, I want to put a pin in that because that takes us a little bit afield of the issue that the season's going to start. What to make of all the reports that we're going to hear more and more of? We heard it already about the Texas Rangers. We heard it about the Philadelphia Phillies, the Colorado Rockies having 3 players, including our friend Charlie Blackmon, testing positive for coronavirus. The Blue Jays coming in from Canada have tested for coronavirus. I'm assuming all 30 teams are going to have some member of their crew that's going to be facilitating these games, or the players themselves testing positive for coronavirus. How does the league handle all this stuff?
Well, this is why they went from a 67-page document outlining the protocols for this season to a 101-page document. And the question of what do they do if they have a mass outbreak on a given team, there really isn't a single answer. In every situation here, they're going to have replacements available. And so you're hoping that if guys do come down with it, and they will, as you're rightly pointing out, there's no way when you have this many people, it's just a numbers game, that you're not going to have people who get COVID-19. You have to have alternatives lined up. And the question of, well, what do you do if a whole team gets it? That's still a good question. They are not intending to shut down unless they have to. But that worst-case scenario, I think, still looms in the back of people's minds.
Well, because it's not just, look, the players, we haven't heard about any hospitalizations or any serious illness, but there are, and every league's going to have to deal with this. The NBA has, Greg Popovich is a 70-year-old man. There are so many members of coaching staffs who are beyond vulnerable that if coronavirus is there and they catch it, this is a whole different story. And the question is anybody opting out? Are you hearing any of that? When does this conversation take place, Evan?
In a way, it's already taking place. Every team doctor has to put together a list in the organization, not just players, of people who are considered high risk. And nobody is going to be forced to be out there. The problem is, from an employee standpoint, the players are covered by the union. Everyone else, if they choose not to go, they're basically at the mercy of the club as to whether they are paid. And that's going to likely be a team-by-team and maybe even simply case-by-case decision, whether a team is feeling generous about a guy's position. But this is why they've developed these different protocols. If you're high risk, you have a certain set of testing procedures. If you're not high risk, they've tried being the key word, to map all this out. But it's got to be a living, breathing document. There's no way to really preemptively figure all this out.
Evan Drellich of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, so have the protocols been agreed to? Is that all set?
Yes, they've reached an agreement on this 101-page protocols. They've got to still set the schedule officially, as I said, but that was the end game a couple days ago here. Once the league announced we're going to do this 60-game season, the thing that took about basically a day at that point was getting the health protocols finalized, and they had been close on that for some time. It didn't take a massive amount of heavy lifting because they had already sent revisions back, the union had, to the league. But, yeah, the health protocols are agreed to, and there's going to be this joint committee between the league and the union where if there are any disputes, for example, whether a guy is indeed classified as high risk, they have a way to sort that stuff out already devised internally.
So let's get into whether players are going to maybe not show up because of the manner in which this was implemented. Is there any issue with that? Or is the bad blood that was boiling over, is that finally now at a simmer, or have we turned the heat off on that?
Oh, no, the bad blood is absolutely still going to be there, but it's going to come down really to questions of money, because if you are not high risk and you sit out, you're at the mercy of the club. And the likelihood that a club is going to say, yeah, even though you're not high risk, we're going to pay you is very small. The question is guys who live with somebody who's high risk. So a player who has a pregnant wife or a young child, maybe a young child who's immunocompromised, and they choose to sit out. The union pushed very hard to have it in the agreement, in the health protocols, that those people could sit out and still receive service time or even pay. They didn't get that in the agreement. So if you're somebody who's living with someone high risk and you are not yourself high risk, you have a choice to make. And there's some hope that teams will be accommodating. There's some wiggle room, too. MLB has a paternity list. MLB has a restricted list where guys could go. So there's some flexibility there, but there's no guarantee for those people. So if anybody's on a bubble, I would think it's them. It's not the high-risk individuals because they're kind of taken care of. It's those who live with somebody who's high risk if they are not themselves high risk.
Evan Drellich of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. So let's talk about what this schedule is. Everybody's playing in their home stadiums? Is that how it's going to work? And then I guess I've got a two-part question there. You could start, if you will, about the Blue Jays. Are they going to have a bubble? Because I can definitely see no contact, no flying into Canada and vice versa, that the Blue Jays are just going to have to come into the United States and stay for the duration from when July 1st hits all the way through to how long they last in the season.
So as of yesterday, this is per information that the union gave to player agents. The Blue Jays have asked their government, Canadian government, local government, whoever that might end up being, for permission to play in Toronto. And they're supposed to hear back today, maybe the next couple days, an end of the week type of thing. If they get approval on that, they're going to ask to play spring training in Toronto, and that would probably take another 5 or so days to get that approval. If they don't get that approval, they'll probably go to Dunedin, which is where they train normally down in Florida. And then the alternate training site, and this part actually, as a native New York State person,
yes,
they could end up in Buffalo. They could end up playing their spring training in Buffalo, spring training part 2. So that's kind of neat, I think, and that's where their AAA team is normally.
That's the stadium that Billy Crystal used to shoot 61, right, Evan?
I'm not sure, but I believe
no, it's a beautiful old school stadium in Buffalo, New York, if I'm not mistaken. So that's where they would camp out, and that's where they would have their games, huh? And you know what? I mean, that would make sense in terms of the Pirates visiting, the Phillies visiting, the Yankees visiting, the Red Sox visiting, the Mets visiting. I mean, that is a geographically sound location, one would think, right, for them to play there?
The East teams in this schedule are all at something of an advantage because they don't have to change time zones. You're playing only your division, your normal division within your league, and your division in the other league. So AL East plays NL East and AL East. The West teams are really kind of screwed in this regard because they're going to have to traverse 3 different time zones there, Central, Mountain, and West Coast. So it would make sense to have the Blue Jays in Buffalo if you needed to, but I don't want to make that a likelihood at this point because they're trying to do everything they can to stay in Toronto.
Right. So, okay. So the schedule would be what? Again, national and American mixed together. It's all one big geographical happy family. Is that the way it would work?
Yeah. East plays East in both leagues. Central plays Central. West plays West. And every team is going to play 10 games against its normal division. So AL East teams are playing 10 games against every other AL East team. So that ends up being 40 games. And then the other 20 games you're playing against the East in the other league, the National League, if you're an AL East team. And most of these series are going to be 3-game and 2-game series.
Okay. And then any doubleheaders or no?
It's looking unlikely that there will be scheduled doubleheaders. It doesn't mean that we won't end up having them, because realistically, there's not going to be a lot of off days here. I think it's 60 games in 66 days is what they're attempting to pull off at this point. I just don't have that number in front of me. But basically, if you have a rainout or you have to reschedule something, particularly with all these teams likely to remain something close to contention, you're not going to have a ton of teams fall out of it, so you might need to get every game played. Mm-hmm. It's totally possible at some point you end up with a doubleheader.
Okay, now let's get into Evan Drellich of The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's now unpin what we discussed earlier on. You talked about expanded playoffs still a possibility. Is the universal DH in this mix?
For this year, the universal DH is already agreed to, and that's because of health. That's for the feeling that you're going to keep pitchers in better shape. And you just don't want a guy going down because he left second base awkwardly. You're going to have limited rosters. You're not going to have, in all likelihood, you're not going to have a full minor league schedule going on in the background. So just for health reasons, this year, you're going to have the DH in both leagues. If they had an agreement on a new deal, that would have brought the DH for next year as well. But you do still have the DH inside of this year.
Well, and in terms of that, too, Evan, with the expanded playoffs, you saw what Trevor Bauer had to say, essentially doing a little bit of a heel turn on his union. And it kind of makes sense, is the fact that, okay, you wanted to keep the ability to file a grievance in your back pocket. That is what definitely keeps the ownership and management on their heels. But when management had put on the table so many different pieces of candy, I guess, that would have actually led to more money being in the pocket of the players right now, don't you think that would actually benefit? So is that why we're hearing that, or you mentioned that the expanded playoffs could be still on the table for this year?
So you're right that the league did dangle extra candy for the players. And the calculation most of the players made here is that, yes, there was a little bit more candy that we could have had, but in exchange for that, we would have had to give the league back so much more candy that it wasn't a fair deal. It doesn't mean that we as players would not have been in a slightly better position for 2020 had we taken that deal. Objectively, they would have been. There was a little bit more money available to them inside this year. It's that in return for that, they would have had to give back things that they simply valued to be a lot higher. And look, in a way, you can say the gamble worked because they're getting a 60-game season, which is exactly the number that the league had made in its last offer. You know, it's not like they're getting fewer games here. And as it goes to the expanded postseason, that's what the league wanted. There's more money attached to it for the league if they can have the expanded postseason. If the league now turns around and says, hey, we will give you, let's say, instead of the $25 million that was discussed in the last offer, we'll give you, I don't know, 50 or some number that makes the players go, okay, that's enough, then yeah, we could still have the expanded postseason in 2020.
Okay. Evan Drellich here on the Rich Eisen Show. What am I not asking? This is really going to happen? I don't need to be trifled with anymore, quite honestly. Evan, what am I not asking? What's going on here?
They're not going to play with your emotions anymore, Rich, I don't think. The question has always been the same, going back months here. It was really never, except maybe in the last couple of weeks, it was really never, are they going to start this season? It's, are they going to finish? And the problem is, you don't have that answer. I don't have that answer. None of them have that answer. And I wouldn't say I'm completely optimistic about it, the chance that we actually get through all of this and they don't have to shut down again, that we get through a whole postseason. But it seems like most people feel like it's worth trying. And then there's, of course, some people who think baseball shouldn't even be back, that it's not safe enough. But I think the general consensus is it's worth the attempt. And thankfully, they're able to make the attempt without being halted by money rather than the health.
Right. So because if they have to stop down because of health, then everybody could sit here and say we tried. And every other league is trying. I mean, every other league is going. Every other league is going to try and figure out how to deal with coronavirus cases popping up that's expected to pop up, and hoping that therapeutics catch up and all of that stuff. My buddy Keith Olbermann tweeted out. He also texted this to me yesterday on my birthday, no less.
Happy belated.
Thank you, sir. Training camp opens 50%. Season opens 25%. Series concludes 0%. What do you think about that?
I don't think it's quite that low, honestly. But it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. They can handle a few guys testing positive, because you could test positive and be asymptomatic or have already recovered. The testing positive itself is not necessarily the most damaging. Not necessarily. The problem is, what if you have a mass outbreak to the point that you're really kind of impacting the entire character of a team, and you hope that you never get to that point, and maybe it is statistically unlikely that, in fact, you would have an outbreak quite that large. But you still have to consider that worst-case scenario. What are you going to have, 25 replacement players, 26, because that's what the roster will end up being this year. You start out with 30, then you go to 28, then you go to 26. You can't reasonably replace an entire team and say, yeah, that was the Phillies in 2020, when they look nothing like what you would expect them to be. So in the end, it could end up in kind of impugning the competitive component of this, right? If a team looks nothing like it was supposed to, well, what do you make of the 2020 season? But this is all the worst-case scenario. Okay. I'm going to ask you a baseball question, Evan. How about that? How about this before I let you go? Wonderful. How about this? No epidemiology, no labor law required here. Just baseball knowledge. How about this? An actual baseball question. The 60-game schedule. Give me a team. Not the blue blood, okay? Not the we got $200 million in the bank, for our don't give a crap about the luxury tax.
Yankees, you mean?
No,
oh,
your
okay.
Red Sox too, pal. Okay. By the way, Liverpool's doing great. Trust me. All right. Werner and Henry are not knocking on the door like it's Trading Places out there. Okay.
Got it.
So. Give me the name of a team that we're not talking about that a 60-game schedule could absolutely let them catch fire, and they have a shot to win a World Series this year. Evan, I'm going to rip off my colleague at The Athletic, Jason Stark, here. Go for it. In his piece about a day ago. He notes that the Twins and the Indians are going to play just 4 teams that had a winning record last year, and the hardest schedules are going to go to the Marlins, Orioles, and Blue Jays, because they're going to play 7 teams that had records of 500 or better. So, look, the general principle, specific teams aside, is that if you're a mediocre team, you've got a much better chance now, because usually in a 162-game slate, you get exposed. You can have a good first half of the season. How many times have we seen somebody at the All-Star break who's kind of in it, and you're thinking, yeah, it's a wild card team, and then they totally fade out in the second half. Well, you don't have a second half now. You don't even have a full first half. So it's going to have teams that probably shouldn't be there on their merits, but nonetheless, they're going to be there. Right. Okay. What about the Padres? I'm only giving a wet kiss to all those Padre fans I pissed off last week because I used them basically as a foil. What about them? What about them? Give me an NL team. You got one? Well, they were under the belief that they would end up contending this year anyway, even in a 162-game season. This is why they unveiled their new jerseys this year. It was supposed to be kind of this culmination of the franchise rebuild. The prospects had arrived. They'd already signed Machado and Hosmer. I think they fit in that category of where, if you were to look at it in a 162-game season, they're probably not the best team in that division. But in this setting, the NL Central is another team. I saw somebody on another division on Twitter yesterday. I can't remember what report it was, but I think it was Zip's projections or one of these fancy statistical projections. Yes. That whole division looks like it's going to be 3 games apart. So you're going to have wild races in every division. Won't this be great? I mean, just if the virus will actually cooperate, that the heavens can open and we can actually finish this damn thing. That would be amazing. And what about analytics? Normally you need a big sample size. This is going to be a smaller sample size. Now you're putting somebody on second base to start the 10th inning because you don't want something going 19 innings when you only got 66 days for, 60 games. And then the rosters, who knows what's going to happen there. I mean, we're going to see actual gut feel more than ever before, do you think?
Yeah, you got to throw a lot of this stuff out the window, whether it's an adherence to analytics, whether it's an adherence to purity of the sport with the DH and the NL and everything that they're changing for this year, including that extra inning rule with the runner on second base. You don't have that option anymore. Managers can still, I'm sure, try to manage by the book as given to them by their front offices. But when every game is so magnified now, usually in the regular season of 162 games, the moments where the book gets thrown out the window anyway is highest intensity. Are you going to go by your numbers, or are you going to go by your feel for what that guy looks like at the plate today, what he's been doing lately, the body language, all that? When you're in a narrow pennant race here, which is what the season really is going to be, I do think you'll see guys managing by the book, but less by the book.
Well, maybe we could use social distancing mandates to get rid of the shift. What do you think about that? You got to spread it out. You can't be too close. Everybody's got to be on their side of second base. Damn it! I hate that shift, man. Yes, I'm sorry. I just used the pandemic to make my case to get rid of the shift. I understand you could think it's too soon.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry. I hate the shift. I'm sorry. Evan, I didn't mean to drag you down with me.
I just remember the first time, basically the first thing Rob Manfred said publicly as a commissioner was that he was thinking about banning the shift, and he got roasted.
I'm sure he did.
For it. People could not believe it. But you know what? I did an interview with him in early October last year, right as the playoffs were starting. We were talking about these higher-level issues within the game, and he made a great point that all these GMs, their only goal is to win one more game, and it impacts the entertainment value of the sport, and he knows his office needs to be certainly one of them, I think, along with the union, thinking about, is that actually good for the sport? Yeah, it's great that the GMs want to win one more game, but is it fun to watch? And give a little bit of credit here as kind of an auxiliary bonus. You're going to get a different looking product this year, and that in itself might be more fun to watch.
I hope so, man. You know what I mean? Yes, I hear you. My buddy DP, and again, we're on Dan Patrick Radio every day on Sirius XM 211. He points out everybody wants to throw 98, 99, 100, and then there's only one way that anybody tries to hit that with a launch angle. And that's it. And that's how we wind up with strikeouts, walks, or home runs for a majority of at-bats, or at least a growing plurality of at-bats. And it's made it very difficult to watch. But I'm just glad to have something to watch. And it appears like it's going to happen. And then maybe, just maybe, this will be more of a laboratory on gut and feel that we've seen in quite some time. Maybe we get that, Evan. That would be great.
Homogeneous baseball isn't fun, or at least not as fun as it could be. I would be interested to see a team that's all speed and defense with a lineup 1 to 9 of 40 and 30 base stealers, 40 a year, 30 a year type of guys, versus a power hitting team. When everybody looks the same, and to your point about pitching, if everybody's throwing 99, the excitement of seeing 99 just disappears, and it's all about optimization and efficiency and blah, 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 corporate culture that's seeping into baseball, and it goes back to entertainment. How do you want to be entertained? I want to see a guy swipe second base occasionally.
Evan, thanks for the call. Again, great stuff, and look for my call again. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rich.
You got it. Evan Drellich of The Athletic, joining me here on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.